All right. I think it should work now. I joined.
Yeah, I see.
W.
Where we starting?
Okay, chat, y'all ready?
I need a banger. I need a banger.
Oh no, can I not hide? Oh, I can.
Yo.
Yep.
You guys ready for a little Big Planet 5?
Bruh. Oh, they're starting with Wolverine.
Ooh, Wolverine off rip.
Okay.
Show me something.
DMC6 incoming.
Hi,
Thought we were
I'm
gonna
Marcus
end with
Smith,
Wolf.
creative director for Marvel's Wolverine. Today, we're excited to debut a new look at the game. To set the stage, Wolverine is in a race against time to rescue a group of kidnapped mutants before they're shipped off to parts unknown by cybernetically enhanced mercenaries known as the Reavers. However, Logan quickly discovers he isn't the only mutant attempting to save them. Let's take a look.
Okay.
Let's see if we can find the one that got away. Redhead.
A redhead.
Might be our only lead.
Boy, mad here he is.
I mean, hey, he's Wolverine, bro.
I do not like this suit. Oh, why is it buffering?
I think my favorite Wolverine suit is the brown one, the brown and black. Yeah, now mine's buffering like crazy too.
I'm going to Twitch. Do they have it on Twitch?
Yeah.
You guys
should.
Yeah, very, very much.
Oh, we ahead on here. Okay, I might stay then.
Oh, we're ahead on here? Okay.
They will take those. Hold up. Oh my god.
God damn. Oh, okay.
Nigga, over the barrel, bro.
Dude said over the barrel and crying. That's supposed to be stealth?
Yeah.
Guy, bro.
Do another sweep. It's too quiet.
Oh, nah.
Bro, stop buffering, bro.
Oh my god.
Bro,
It's a lot of blood.
Nah. Oh. You don't like these.
Shut it, freak.
Shut it, freak.
That's him, Logan. You see, it's a kid in there, man.
It's crazy.
Shit's gassing off. Not today, Bob.
Oh, yeah. That nigga Darth Maul?
Oh, damn. Darth Maul is crazy.
Up there! We need backup now!
Oh my god. No.
Ooh, that boy leg. Ooh. Yeah, we're not sugarcoating it. What the fuck?
Hold up. Oh yeah, girl.
Whoa.
It is not okay.
There you are, Brad.
Them boys is smooshed. Bro, my video! Oh my god.
You want me to stream for you?
Yes, please.
Wait, can I even do that?
Oh shit, I just leaked.
You're not going anywhere.
Chat, in the meantime, let me just...
I did it. I don't know if it'll work though.
Son of a bitch!
It might not work.
Nah, it's cool. I just watched the video. All good. I'll fix it when they're switching games. Goodness, bro.
Oh, damn.
Wolverine or Overwatch?
Oh, so she fights with you as like an assist.
Yo.
Bro, nah, that slide is cold.
Boy got a chunk in his back missing.
Spartan mode.
Oh, that's pretty sick, yeah.
What the hell?
No.
I said, what the hell? Oh,
Kill,
shit.
Logan, kill!
Yo, why they got low
God
ass
damn. Why do you have low ass arms?
Let's go.
You sure they ain't the villains? God damn.
I'm saying, bro.
You got Jack Harlow in the front.
Yeah, that'll work.
Bro, you know how much that gotta hurt? Two claws and then he pick your ass up? Like, chill, bro. Like with it.
God damn.
Oh my gosh.
Where are those mutants?
Woo. That claws he got. Hey, get him out of there, Logan.
Bro, there's no.
Boy, look at his health. He's just regenning. He's just passively regenning. Mid-fight.
Oh, I didn't even know
That healing factor.
Yeah. W, high speed region.
Get out of my way.
He just kicked
Nah,
that dude down.
definitely chill. There's no way you missed this.
Ooh.
My aunt's a treat.
Bro, based on the scenery, I already know Sabretooth is popping up.
Oh, ads here. I'm gonna touch the thing so you can go. There's no ads. Hold on.
Did I not Adam Smasher? Get to him, Logan.
I changed the ads shot. I put it once every hour. But they don't give you none though. But I'm gonna snooze it next time it's about to happen.
Oh, crazy regen, bro.
God damn. Dog, we can forget the claws just tossed me off. Oh, oh, oh.
Yeah, smart.
Oh my god,
Wait,
bro.
damn,
There's-
you
how does this game make it on YouTube? I don't see it. But I can
You
flag.
like the blur
mean-
so much.
Yeah, you might have to.
Oh, shoot. No.
Oh.
Redhead.
That nigga weaving though. Hold on, Darth Maul.
Look at his back.
Let's get you guys out of here.
So fucked
Are you a
up.
superhero?
Lock it.
Superhero.
I'm Wolverine.
Oh, fuck.
Oh, shit.
Damn, that's pretty sick.
Close the door, bro, before they get hit. Okay. That was hard.
He had
though.
the suit on. That was sick.
That was hard. That was hard.
The suit fit.
Oh,
Is that
shit. Not
Mystique?
done. Ooh, the
The
feet!
Marvel Rivals skin.
Sentinels? That is not Deadpool.
I knew it was gonna see Sabretooth.
Yeah. Oh my god, a bunch of different fits.
Gosh, bro.
Cool.
Nigga, Sabretooth. Oh, they got the brown fit.
We hope you enjoyed that new
I like his
look at
white suit
Marvel's
fit. That should be
Wolverine.
sick.
Timber.
This is a single-player action-adventure game
definitely
featuring
is.
a focused, story-driven experience.
Chat, it
that will
stopped
send
lagging. I might
Logan
not even
on a
have to
perilous
swap
journey
off of
across the
YouTube.
globe, where more
We good,
Why
right?
is there a Temu Deadpool?
My stream, we good?
Who the hell was up?
In this game, mutants
that
live
was
in
actually
hiding,
crazy.
fearful of those who would hunt them down. While most of the
Oh,
rest
yeah,
of the
I just looked at the
game-
Twitch
That is
version.
not Deadpool, bro.
As
The
you
Twitch
saw,
version's hella
you'll
far
encounter
behind.
Iconic Marvel characters like Jean
Bet.
Grey, Mystique, and
Chillin',
Sabretooth.
Some folks
Let me know
can't
if
wait
anything
to
messes
die.
up, y'all.
We also showed you a glimpse of
He
the
said, "Just
brutal
take my money?"
combat you'll experience in Marvel's
Nah, this getting
Wolverine.
beaten
It's
just as fast as Spider-Man got
fluid,
beat.
and visceral
Son,
in the
me.
way that
Son.
only Logan can deliver.
On me.
Son.
Marvel's
Just give me
Wolverine
brown
is
suit,
built to
Logan,
take
I'm in
full
there.
advantage of the PlayStation 5 console.
Y'all hear this guy,
We
chat?
cannot wait for you to get
Hold
your
up,
hands
tell me
on
something.
it when it launches September 15th, 2026. We're also happy to announce that you can pre-order your copy today at the end of the show in select markets. Check
not
out
that far
PlayStation
either.
Blog for more information.
Alright, chat, turn ads
behalf
off on
of
Twitch.
everyone at Insomniac
You won't get an
Games,
ad for the next
thank you for
hour.
Pre-ordering?
See you next
Not
time.
that crazy.
For the
over
next
there.
hour, there's no ads. But when you do get an ad, it will be 9. That is the lowest I can put it. But I'll warn you guys before you get it. Actually, I'll snooze it.
Hello
I'll try
and
to snooze
welcome
it.
to State of
But you're not gonna get an ad
I'd
for an
like to
hour.
start by thanking Marcus
You
and the
might
whole
get
team
9.
at Insomniac for
No,
the
might.
extended look at Marvel's Wolverine.
But I snoozed it
We've got a
for an
ton
hour.
more to share with news and updates
good,
from
Sid?
both PlayStation Studios and third-party studios from around the globe. Let's get right to it with the latest from our friends at Arc System Works.
Yeah, let's go. Talk
XDev,
about already.
And Marvel Games.
W. Hold on, let me see this. Let me see
Wait,
this.
am I behind?
Yeah, you might be.
Oh yeah, I'm
Speed up, speed up, speed up, speed up.
Hold up.
Who we got? Carnage. Let me see Deadpool.
Carnage?
Whoa.
They summoned Carnage?
Wait. We don't know yet. We don't know yet.
Master of the pugilistic art.
It's either gonna be Dr. Doom's team or Ghost Rider's team. We don't know yet.
Mr.
Who the hell is this?
Actions are worth
That's
more
Omega Red, no?
than any word.
And the greatest action is
Oh, it's my nigga
to
Doom.
fight.
Throwing that other
You
dude.
have defeated so many.
Oh, it's Doom's team.
You've defeated whole worlds.
Let's see Venom.
But
Knight's
you
Doom.
never fought Doom.
I need to see that
Let me
Venom. I need to
show
see
you why
Carnage.
you should leave.
Something.
Think you're a genius, Doom? Your works are mere trinkets. My genius is endless.
We got.
And now my
Magneto.
Magneto with it.
promises Doom. And
Yeah,
those
I ain't gonna lie, there was no way he
Oh,
wasn't
he
making
looks
it in the game.
This violence will solve
He looks
nothing.
sick too.
My dearest Aurora, mutant kind shall
God.
rise. And
Oh, he look crazy.
Yellow Storm, too.
He look crazy. Green Goblin.
You look a little angry, Bug.
Oh shit.
Fucking mad, bro.
Time to stop laughing, Gobby.
Oh my god, they actually added a what?
Carnage. This team is sick.
My music. Carnage.
Oh my god. Wait. This guy's
Sarah, look
crazy.
at my screen.
Moment has come.
I'm on that.
Red W man. W Ren.
Don't be greedy.
Nah, Carnage. No, Dr. Doom's team is
Yo, Ray,
insane.
turn up for me a little bit if you can.
Knights of Doom.
what?
Can you turn up for me a little bit? Like a tiny bit.
By wrath. The end is near.
Was that a sentinel on a stick? The head on the...
Bro, Green Goblin is crazy, bruh. I'm not even gonna lie.
Oh, they got a
Right
new
on the team
artwork.
with Spidey.
Yo, that new artwork is sick.
Right on the main roster.
We still have one more team.
Little Big Planet 5.
I see
Yo, that
from
team
my
is
perch
sick.
atop the tree of tranquility.
Wait,
Yet
this opening of State of Play is
there are
actually
some
gas.
outcomes that are
Nah, that was
uncertain,
good ass.
even to me.
Oh my god, bro.
Rayman is back.
Man, get a new game, bro.
Oh wait, this State of Play is crazy, bro. What? This State of Play is
Rayman!
actually insane. What is the State of Play?
Your heroics will no doubt be the stuff of tales
What?
quite
Rayman!
throughout the Glade of Dreams.
Dropping all the videos early.
Calming biscuits? But
Oh, it's co-op too? Great way to do that, bro. Actually, perfect way.
Oh my, Rayman is back?
Damn.
Follow me, brave heroes. The Glade of Dreams is in grave danger.
It's time I made my mark.
it's 4 against 1. You don't stand a chance. Maybe he stands a little bit of a chance.
Nah, it's not Chino, but I don't think we seeing nothing like that in here, bro.
Wait, we're seeing what?
Mega Man?
You could. Mega Man is back.
Bro, I don't think they showing no Mega Man stuff in
And
here.
last time we seen was Game Awards.
That would get me hyped, though.
You could see Mega Man. You could.
That's for my nigga Mega Man. Dang, yeah, they 3 for 3, huh? Legend Cold. I ain't gonna lie, yeah, they definitely 3 for 3. 4-player co-op?
Get out. All right, put it.
October.
Watch that.
What's this now?
Oh, this is that diving game.
Freaking
That's
bad.
it's like a diving game where you gotta.
What is
I
this?
showed a chef.
Oh, it's the samurai game. Not the samurai, the fishing game. Is this the fishing game?
Probably
Dave the Diver.
Game. He was
Yeah,
cooking
it's like
something.
it's a diving.
Yeah, it's Dave the Diver.
We do that for Weezy? Nah, I was gonna say the same thing too, like for Weezy a little bit.
Oh, the lagging.
Just say.
I said very easy. What?
Hey, y'all getting on the game like these or what? Yeah, I'm not even gonna question what grandma was doing.
Very easy checking it up. Bancho the
If
chef.
they send me a code for the game, I'll get on. You know, you feel me?
The fuck is this? The hell is this? This better not be another hero shooter.
Exactly what it's about to be.
Oh,
scared hype train supporting with the prom. Appreciate you, twin. Love you. Thank you so much, bro.
Infamous?
No, I'm not gonna lie. Like first
I
glance,
wish.
it did look like Infamous. A little bit.
Yeah.
Like standing on the pole.
You're a yokai hunter.
What is this, bro? A frick?
Shoot! The
Woman
fuck?
kinda decent,
What am I
like.
looking at? What is the goal here? You hunting yokais? For real?
Combo is not clean. 3 players? Nah, let's get on this, bro. Lock it in.
We don't know if it's good yet.
Bro, I can see this being tough a little bit.
Bro, this is Orin.
Alright, that shit might be $80. You know what I'm saying? Let's get on this. It's $80.
If they got character customization, I'll get on this.
That's only the beginning.
What, Larry?
Whoa.
I'll give this a 0.5. If they send me a code, I'll boost it up to a full 1.
Hi everyone! お久しぶりです。安心の
ありがとうございます
Jeez, that's
Did
gotta
you
be
miss me?
racist.
I missed you! と言っても多分私のことを知らないし忘れてる人もいるかもしれないんですけど
Cancel this guy ASAP.
見てね、お姉さんです。今日皆さんにお届けしたのは
Cancel him
妖怪
ASAP.
ハンターアクションゲーム煙です。
Konnichiwa, fine
舞台は煙シティ。この世とあの世が混ざってるカオスな街をアジアをベースにいろんなカルチャーが入り混じってます。煙あるところに妖怪ありという言葉がありまして、それを妖怪ハンターが見つけ出します。そこで使うのが妖怪ハンターだけが使えるフォックスウィンドウ、狐の窓です。この窓を介してパラノーマル現象や妖怪を見つけ出して、で可視化してそこに妖怪を反応する。しかし妖怪をただただ集めるわけではありません。私たちのゲームでは妖怪と契約をしなければなりません。頂上をまとい、
Rice Picker, that's his fucking name, bro. Yeah, not but they keep bringing this shit up like that wasn't his username.
Yo, what's good? NRH Bussum, how you doing, my boy?
What?
かっこいいアパレルをまとって
Bro, he said he was interested in the game,
強い妖怪に挑んでこの世界の謎に近づいていく。ハンターは種類が3つありまして、1つは刀ハンターになります。もう1つは弓ハンター。次はシャーマン。
The way he was skipping at that building kind of tough.
マルチプレイあります。仲間と一緒に暴れて死にかけて妖怪ハンターとして一緒にこの煙シティで煙って遊んでいただければ嬉しいです。
VIP?
私たちはカオスをお届けして笑いをお届けしたいと思って煙を作っています。あの世に最も近い都市煙シティへようこそと言いたいところですが、煙はまだまだ開発中です。情報いっぱい落としていきますので、もうとにかく煙の世界をこれから楽しんでください。レッツ煙、煙っていこう。 Shoo, shoo, shoo. Shoo, shoo, shoo. Shoo,
Beeful?
shoo, shoo. Ka, 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 ka,
People
ka.
went open road though. They had like a whole stage. All type of stages. But I see what
Art,
you mean.
I like the art for the game. Tomb Raider. Woo!
Tomb Raider.
Woo!
Been halfway across
hold
the
on,
continent
Laura.
looking for you.
God damn. Hold on.
Oh, Laura. Oh.
Hard woman to track down.
Well, you found me.
Damn.
Ms. Croft, I hear when it comes to retrieval,
Oh my god!
you are the one to hire.
Lord Almighty.
Where are we supposed to look?
I don't know if she's supposed to look like this.
This is a
I don't know
puzzle
if she's supposed to look like this. Hold on.
buried in centuries of silence.
They know what they doing.
You don't strike me as someone who walks
Yo!
past a locked door
They know
without
what they
wondering
doing
what's
at that
behind
studio.
it.
Me.
There's a reason I can only trust you.
I don't recall her having
I'm
all
loving the
this.
gameplay so far.
Bro, fuck the gameplay.
Wait, the F the gameplay.
Bro, fuck the gameplay. Oh my.
It's crazy.
She rated Tombs.
Yeah, gameplay, slang play. What are you looking at? They can take my money now. They can take my money now.
Gotta say,
Get this dude off my
your
screen.
good side.
No, I'm joking.
Just released the model. I don't care about the game.
You're assuming I've got a pass.
5.5
my
out of 10.
god.
Good game.
Yeah, you need to get on that new 007 game. I don't know if you'll be able to beat it though.
That
game is fire.
How you gonna say that?
Actually, it's a short game. You can. You low key can. I'm not even trolling.
But that's on the list. I heard that game was fire.
That's why I've been playing it. It's just heat.
It's supposed to be like Hitman.
It's like
I played
Hitman
and I
and-
beat that. Yep.
It's like Hitman and
today?
Uncharted mixed together.
What is that game of the year? Oh, it's that good, huh?
What did you like about it?
He's big.
Yeah, the people are saying it's game of the year. Yeah.
He said it's Uncharted.
This is Jurassic
No,
Park. No, I think the 07 is like Uncharted and Hitman. Oh, what the?
Yeah, it gotta be Jurassic Park. I don't know.
Horror game?
Nothing else makes sense to me. Yeah.
Looking like a 6 out of 7. Okay.
Oh, okay. Yo, chat, y'all surviving in a situation like this, bro? Be honest.
I would.
Another question.
They're like me, I'm getting out. They're not catching me.
What is that? Imagine this just start chasing you.
Oh
The moment something that can fly start chasing me, though, I
What
might be
was
finished.
that?
There's always
Not
a
gonna lie.
choice.
The Lost Wild.
No, that was actually clean for a trailer.
Son, what was that dino? I have never seen that
Like,
dino
they
in my
haven't made
life.
yet. That's crazy.
Oh, Badell special right here.
Don't worry, they get to the gacha slop soon.
It's a Dark Soul. It's a Soul like already.
Oh shit.
This is that one game, right?
Oh, this is Phantom Blade Zero, no? Oh my god,
Oh,
I
this
took
Phantom
this off
Blade.
the list.
I just want to
I
pass.
took
Phantom
this
Blade.
off the list. I should have fucking kept it on. I took it off the bingo, didn't I? Yeah, I did. It was right here.
Yo, he looked he proud of him with one hand, bro.
His hand. With the baby in his hand.
Bro, you got the vampire mask on. Hold on.
Just like me. That's a visor cat.
What the hell?
Ripping him by the throat?
Bro, I swear the trailer gets shorter.
Like
The trailers
15
get shorter and
seconds.
shorter every time. It's crazy.
What the hell?
That's fucked up.
I swear the first one we got was like a long, like 5-minute joint.
Bro, do you know how expensive that was? Must have been though.
And we knew immediately that this game had incredible potential.
though.
Once again, Phantom
Look
Blade is one
forward
of
to
them
more
ones that get
details in a
passed, bro. I'll
gameplay
probably
and
play
story
this
deep
one.
dive coming later this summer.
Who had me? Is this Cam?
Persona.
Next, let's head over to the sandworm-infested sands of Arrakis.
My camera keeps
You gotta get at least one miss.
In this open-world survival RPG, you can fully immerse yourself in the world of Dune. Unravel a cinematic story filled with mystery and intrigue, featuring many of the characters from the books and movies.
Chat just randomly says smash. Like, what are you even talking about?
I got ads. Oh shit. Oh, it didn't take effect yet.
Alone or with friends, you will explore the vast open world of Arrakis and learn to survive and thrive by unlocking the secrets of the Fremen.
Wait, it should have took effect.
Along the way, you'll discover new technologies, craft gadgets and weaponry.
Bro, they sent me this game,
chat.
You know that?
Of operations
no way.
That will grow and expand as you progress towards
if you got it, let's get on, bro.
I don't have this. They didn't send me it.
Pursue the
what team is this? Star Wars Outlaws?
Swordmaster,
Awakening.
Trooper,
oh, no, they didn't send me
or
that.
Mentat. And master anything from mind control to brutal hand-to-hand combat.
You should demand money.
Dune
I'm not gonna lie, you shouldn't
choose to play with your friends
just like.
or alone.
I guess
but they ask you first, or they just shut up.
Most of the time they would do that.
If they ask, make sure you like ask for money. Like, don't just take that shit because they'll continue sending you shit for free.
Not like I played it.
Dune Awakening arrives on PS5 on
Like, if it's a game you're not that interested in, like, you should like ask if you get paid to like play it. You know?
The fan favorite PS2 classic Dynasty Warriors 3 is getting remastered for PS5.
I'm good, bro.
Dynasty Warriors 3 Complete Edition Remastered
is
a
one of them
modern
games that
revival
held you
of the
down
2001 game
back in the day,
that
bro.
established the foundation
Exactly,
of the
bro.
series.
You
never
Players
did
can
Dynasty
become one of
Warriors.
over 40 officers and experience intense
Cobra,
1
what are you
versus 1,000
talking about?
skirmishes across vast battlefields.
What are you talking
And
about,
joining the
Cobra?
battle is Zolan, the protagonist
I have
from
no clue
Dynasty
what you're talking
Warriors
about.
Origins.
Yeah, of course, dude, you know about all these Dynasty Warriors games, bro. I'm not even disrespecting them, bro. You know, but like, you can really only play these for like an hour and 30 before you gotta get off.
You don't know
Warriors
about when
3
those towns
Complete
and stuff,
Edition
bro.
Remastered
You have to download
launches
the free
later
trial
this year.
demos, bro.
Pre-orders start
I
today.
know about them days, trust. I know about those.
You never did Dynasty Warriors.
From the award-winning studio
promise I
behind the
downloaded
Ori
that
series
Dynasty Warriors
comes a
at least
bold
once.
new vision for action
We can
RPGs.
skip this.
No Rest for the Wicked is a brutal Souls-like
Oh,
built
I have
around
this game.
skill,
They sent me it.
consequence,
I was
and
gonna play it on my
precision
Steam Deck.
combat. Step into a living
like a
hand-painted
Souls-like,
world
but
you can
top-down.
explore alone, or share with friends in
You hear
your
that,
own
Vidal?
Oh, it's
persistent
co-op
realm.
now? What the fuck?
A world that evolves
Four
even
players.
when you're offline.
I know it's
The
co-op
highly
now. I have
anticipated
it.
full 1.0 release expands
Yeah, I have it
everything.
right here.
A massive world, a deep class and progression system,
Co-op make it a little
and
cooler.
hundreds of hours
I did not
of
know it was gonna be
content,
cool.
including endgame, all with full crossplay and cross-save. No Rest for the Wicked launches on PS5
Oh,
this
it's not
summer
on PS5 yet.
I'll get that
and
half,
is
yeah.
available
We can
to
get that
wishlist
half
now.
because of the co-op.
I didn't know it was a
Up next, let's check in with
Only on
Capcom
PC.
for an update on Onimusha: Way of the Sword.
Onimusha. Okay, what about Street Fighter?
It's
Onimusha.
Onimusha,
Beast isn't far from an Oni, you know.
You do
Played this at
follow his example.
TwitchCon.
I thought
It
you'd
was
see
fun.
the appeal in Sassy.
It was fun.
I'll probably end up giving this a full point.
This shit nasty though.
Ooh.
I mean, but there's fucking demons and shit.
Musashi, I sense Genma.
Oh! That was
Prepare
gold.
yourself. No ordinary Genma
Oh,
can
that was
win
sick,
something.
yeah.
I like his fighting style.
I doubt this area was designed to welcome visitors. The castle's owner must be terrible.
Oh, nigga!
What was that? Oh, that's disgusting.
You're gonna be one of them ones.
Yeah, I told you
I'm
they was
gonna
nasty
this
though.
nigga ass. I already know.
Oh, maybe you catch up.
You shame yourself, Jarl. Witness my light.
I like this stage too.
I'm so fucking behind. There we
If
go.
you live by the sword, fighting is everything. So you've lost. Will you swap the sword for a trowel?
Like hell I will.
No. What then? Are you going to start taking human souls?
Radon?
If human
Look,
souls
you got the Radon helmet on.
are what it takes.
Damn.
Musashi, if that's the path he walks, I will follow.
taking human souls now?
I've
Hold on.
chosen to trust Musashi's judgment in all matters.
Ori departed. Give me
I like it.
of power that you have.
The fuck is
in
this?
return.
Then get going.
Oh shit.
Onimusha.
Kurama Awakening?
I forgot what that film was called. The old games. Oh, there's a release date. Ooh, let's go.
Okay. They drop in September as well. Okay.
Today.
Oh my gosh.
Curse.
We can't wait to get our hands on Onimusha Way of the Sword this
So,
September. But
Street Fighter
you won't
Season
have
3?
to wait long to try it yourself.
I'll give that a point still.
Here's
I think
one
that
more
looks pretty
update from the Onimusha team.
Oh, one more? Let me see
I'll
this.
probably get on Phantom Blade before that one.
Oh, it's a demo? Yeah, I figured.
Oh,
I already
dropping
played the demo. I already played it, so I can't play it again. I played it at TwitchCon already. Remember, chat? I streamed it when I was streaming from TwitchCon. It was a while ago, though. When the demo is out today.
Sonic game. Go ahead and drop a new Sonic Unleashed.
Cool.
Let's get a Sonic Unleashed. New
Son,
Sonic
he
game,
says Sonic Unleashed. Do y'all hear this guy? Can I see the new Blade game again? What the fuck?
Nigga, open this sets up. This about to be. Oh, I might like this. Hold on.
Okay.
What is this, chat? It's a new horror game.
Oh, it's the.
Oh, this is Silent Hill game.
Hey, who's
I remember it was like Silent Hill got black people now. I was like, what?
I was gonna say they got niggas now.
It's the first.
I was like,
first
what?
Silent Hill with a nigga. Oh
I'll be
shit.
out there, but fuck it, bro.
They said they got black people in Silent Hill now.
He the only one there too.
Where did you go, Simon?
Shoot, man.
I was fucking crying, bro.
You know damn well it's
Something
not be
doesn't
out
feel
there.
right.
In Silent Hill, this is just not true because any black dude is not doing this.
Right? These intricate puzzles, bro. Come on.
We'd have
walk
been
the other
gone,
way,
bro. What the fuck?
Zoe?
Zoe, who?
Sorry,
Who we looking for?
Who? We'd have been gone.
Zoe?
If that's your girl, then I'll give you a pass.
What are you doing?
That's not his
I think
girl,
it's his
bro.
daughter. Or something. I don't fucking know. I think you said you were his daughter, so he gets a pass. I don't remember. It's been announced so far. A lot of shit. Ugh.
What the hell is that?
Hold on, chat. We might got it on.
The fuck? Like 3 bowls fused together.
I'm so sorry.
They have arms, bro.
His arms are like
Take your
bowls.
ass off, bro.
Yeah, take your ass home.
Arby's meat.
Oh, it's also September. Damn, all these games are September. It's fucking Arby's meat is crazy.
The target is the front gate of the capital of our homeland.
How much stuff
The
September?
Federation of Central Asia.
Bondi.
We will storm from the sea and
This
take
Armored
the capital
Core?
back from our enemy.
Oh, no way.
So you're the next one.
What is this?
The one whose rear will have
No,
to
it's
cover?
not. I think.
People left behind back on the continent need something to hold on
Jet
to.
games.
Some sort of symbol that inspires hope.
We will be in visual range of the land
Ace
battleship
combat?
soon.
Oh.
Giant!
The frick? World of Tanks 3?
Enemy artillery intensified. Where's Wings when you actually need him? All units return to base.
What the fuck?
Natasha Rex.
Oh, that dude dead. Oh.
That's where the Wings of Thief comes in. The legendary savior. Dee Dee wants the legendary savior to get as much publicity as possible. The more exposure, the better.
Cannons firing. We're gonna be wiped out.
All aircraft, pull out.
Sorry,
Who we fighting, y'all?
Joker one.
Above you flies the Wings of Thieves. No harm will come to you. Hands to the sky, everyone! Hope is within reach!
The Terminus fingers.
What, the imposter?
Sharing information isn't always about telling people the truth.
That's all we can offer, right, Joker One?
It's an ambush. Shadows.
Just as planned. We dangled the bait and Wings took it.
We'll find out soon enough.
Would you please? Green light, defensive maneuver.
He's getting a 0.5 from me. Not my cup of tea. It's decent though.
You never ran away, did you?
Here we go, Rex.
Come on, Ray.
Let's go, Rex.
These guys belong to you, Rex. Go take what's yours.
Combat 8. Yeah, who getting on that? Talk to me, bro.
Let me know. こんにちは。エースコマットシリーズブランドディレクターの河野です。お待たせいたしました。エースコマット8ウィングスオブシールの発売日は2026年10月2日。アーリーアクセスは9月29日になります。今回の映像では皆さんがエースコンバット8で直面する出来事を一つ一つのカットに意味を持たせて約2分にギュッと詰め込んでいます。自由自在に空を飛び、ファイトの興奮を味わいながらドラマティックな英雄体験ができる。他にはないエースコンバットだけの空はもうすぐそこに広がっています。加えてもう一つお伝えしたいことがあります。こちらの映像をご覧ください。
Did you know there are 3 kinds of aces?
The hell? Why is fucking Peter Parker talking to me like that?
今回エースコンバット8ウィングスオブシーブにはダウンロード版はプレイオーダー特典としてパッケージ版には早期購入特典としてエースコンバット0ザ・ベルカン4の移植版がつくことになりました。ぜひ8と世界を同じくするストレンジリアルの世界をもっと深く楽しんでください。お知らせした通り発売まではあと少しです。出撃の準備を整えてお待ちください。
Okay, son.
ありがとうございました。
We gotta have a talk.
That's some bad news. No shot at your blood.
Saber. What was this? This is not Need for Speed. Need for Speed.
It might be.
Could be, yeah.
Why? Fast and Furious.
Forza? No, I don't know about Forza.
Forza just dropped another game.
Yeah, they just dropped it, right? Last Need for Speed was Unchained, I think. What the fuck?
It's kind of clean.
Oh wow. Oh, okay.
Oh.
What?
What the?
What is going on?
What?
Oh.
A Portal Crossworlds?
They got the Back to the Future
We're
with.
playing Sonic Crossworlds?
Okay.
This about to be a Need for Speed trailer, bro. Or something.
What?
Huh?
Great take. Think we got it.
Yep. What
role play back.
The hell? Stuntman Hollywood. I see a stuntman. It's a game about being a stuntman. Oh. Right, horizontal. Watch on Twitter, dude. Okay, I guess. Interesting. And cut. No comment.
It's like a beast tore him apart. A beast? Out here? Are you drunk or something? Do him up and show him out. But he's still weak, so be careful.
What's going on?
Shit's terrible.
For a midnight club.
Ew, oh
my God.
Hurry up, move it! Save your ammo.
How could that do head gone?
Oh, it's this game. I remember seeing this. Yeah, this that disgusting game.
Surprisingly lively for someone who just came out of a coma.
Yeah, we seen a trailer for this long time ago. I think it was the one with that little baby, that disgusting ass baby running across the
what is that?
Screen.
You fell from the moon.
Is that the Call of Duty map?
Yeah, the graphics are sick. Call of Duty map is. Oh, who's she?
That reminded me of
Go there.
No comment.
Okay. What the fuck?
I'll take my chances.
Oh my god.
Turns out I'm a lucky man.
Oh, what even is that?
Yeah, I'm playing this shit. I'm playing this shit. What is the game name?
Nah, why would
I'm playing this shit.
Ew.
Well, 2027?
Bro, nah, I need to be you dead to be prayed for.
I'm playing this shit. Ew.
Hell nah.
That shit was disgusting as fuck.
Hell nah, boy.
I'm playing it. What is this?
That is crazy, bruh.
Something is coming. I have to go. It felt
Is it?
like an
That's that game where
earthquake.
the MP that girl got
That's one of the best directs they've done so far. What the fuck?
But it was just a paperclip. Falling off a desk. The tiniest tremor before the main event.
Jesse.
I know what they put you through. You never had a chance.
Persona 6? Fucking P6
2 days
on his
before
back.
the lockdown fell, an uncategorized resonance appeared in Manhattan.
His back
Things
said
stand
P6.
right now, Dylan. You're our only shot at survival.
Markiplier? Okay. The fuck?
What happened to her?
The fuck is that?
You're not even fucking human.
Oh wow.
The FBC locked me in that cell for years and forgot about me. The hiss.
You got a
It was a
USB-C
way
on the
out.
back of the head.
People can change. The past doesn't
He
matter.
does have a whole block in his head.
W weapon choices.
Who are you today?
Control resonant. Yeah. 0.5.
The fuck?
We're gonna have a lot of fun together.
Oh.
What's this?
Oh, okay. That was that.
Oh, all right. I was about to segue into something.
A lot of fun together indeed.
Bro, how many times they gonna show this game? I swear
Marathon?
Yes.
Oh, I know they're mad. I know they're mad in the YouTube chat because they've been spamming Destiny for so long, and they just announced Destiny's not getting more updates. They stopped working on Destiny to work on Marathon, and the entire fan base is pissed. They are fucking pissed. Now, I check the YouTube chat right now. I know they're mad. I know they're mad.
Said shooter swap.
Yo, look at this. They're all spamming L. They're all spamming save Destiny. We want Destiny. They mad as fuck. They are mad as fuck. They closed the chat.
Pretty much done though, no?
Destiny? I mean, the fan base ain't done with it.
They hated the last 3 expansions. I didn't think they were gonna get any.
Imagine if they were to just drop a new one.
IGN banned the word Destiny 3 from their chat. Damn.
How old is Destiny for real, bro?
Pretty old, but
It
always gets updates. And DLCs are like $40 a piece. That shit is expensive.
Hell no.
Fuck that. Yeah, they were spamming that chat up like crazy. I think they just closed it. Ew, what is that? Oh shit, that guy got cooked.
Good ass name.
It's like futuristic arc raiders.
I'm not gonna lie, I was on Warframe more.
Arc raiders is crazy.
Do you crave endless
Just look like Roblox.
Alright, buddy.
Can we stop, bro?
New maps. So they are not about to say anything with Destiny. These guys are so mad. I know they're mad.
The dangerous and cutthroat world of Marathon expands today with its second season, Nightfall. And if you haven't checked out Marathon yet, Bungie announced an open trial period for the launch of Season 2. You'll also be able to pick up Marathon at a discount.
Bungie, bro.
Now, let's take a look at what's coming soon to PlayStation Plus. Up first, a beloved fantasy world is finally coming to PlayStation for the first time.
Fantasy world?
The hell is RuneScape Dragon Wilds is an open world survival game where you rise from survivor to dragon slayer. Play solo or with friends as you explore
get my Minecraft account.
A beautiful, dangerous new frontier in the RuneScape
I think I lost it. I need to buy a new one.
Power is earned and every action deepens
remember when they transferred the Mojang thing and you had to like claim your account? I never did that. So I think my account is like gone. I think. I gotta check.
I had to rebuy mine more recently.
I think I have to rebuy Minecraft. I gotta do that.
Craft stronger gear. Master magic, melee, and ranged combat.
Yeah, y'all getting on this?
I have to check my emails. I'm pretty sure I don't have a Minecraft account anymore. I mean, they did remind us like fucking 10 million times. I just didn't care.
Make it yours.
That shit is gone. Damn.
RuneScape Dragon Wilds arrives day 1 on PlayStation Plus later this year.
Oh, Pixelmons and RL Crafts I played, damn, all gone.
Next up, here's a preview of games coming to the Classics catalog over the next few months.
Can we get some heavy hitters?
In June, battle colorful
enemies
this? With musical instruments and
They're having a seizure. Why is he killing them?
Hold up.
Hey.
Why were they getting electrocuted in the back?
Nah, you kind of going crazy though.
In July, PsyOps The Mindgate Conspiracy joins the Classics catalog. This PS2 action adventure mixes run and gun gameplay with psychic powers.
So where's the infamous?
I got the force.
Mindgate Conspiracy.
Small caliber.
And finally, Onimusha Dawn of Dreams, a Capcom classic from 2006, launches later this year in August.
Oh.
How was this?
There we go.
Yo, where's the cage?
Fresh.
Akashima Island.
The fuck?
Haunted by dark stories. Our goal, confront the evil, corrupting power.
Bro, this Indiana. No.
This is Dead True International.
What? The fuck is this? The quarry? But the quarry was so fucking silly, dog. Yeah, you know she dying.
Over! Rotated on that one.
A for effort, dude.
So when they all dying?
This the new Life is Strange.
Nah, bro, that's the new Dark Pictures game, trust.
We don't see.
Oh, you two haven't met yet, right?
Sebastian, I'll be looking out for you.
Roland, whenever you're ready.
This facility has been shut down for decades.
Literally.
Uninvestigated, untold.
This look like an IRL Twitch stream.
Now.
Oh, somebody about to go missing. Yo!
Yeah, you.
Huh?
Did you hear that?
Oh, no, I'm about to eat most of them.
Nate, are you out there?
Oh!
In half?
We gotta go.
That's a crazy start, bro.
Yeah.
I have a bad feeling.
Let's get rid of it.
Grip it tight.
Go! He's coming!
Who the fuck is it?
Take a deep breath.
I got big as shit too.
Which way? Steady the mind.
We're gonna have to jump!
There's rocks down there!
Push, Luke!
Why was
Hold on, let me play this. Hold on.
Wait, indecision? Wait, hold on.
he's dead.
Did he die?
Oh.
Wait, Tom, we might actually have to get on this.
Yo, push
Tom, we might dead have to get on this. Wait, indecision, mate?
Until dawn?
It's until dawn 2! Oh! That makes sense! That makes perfect sense!
Okay, yeah.
I didn't know they were making
I did not expect that.
Wow.
I did not expect that.
Oh my god.
Yo, I thought Decision not said hold
fucking
up.
sell me.
Until Dawn.
Wow.
In Until Dawn 2, a successful
Yeah, no, we there.
ghost hunters
Yeah.
and fake
That's the
and
word,
honest
bro.
content come face to
Do
face
not
with real
fucking
horrors
sell
for
me
the
again,
very first
Dara.
time.
Whenever you're ready.
Bro, I'm there. I'm there. I'm there, bro.
Fucking sell me
They visit an
again.
abandoned tropical island.
Who gonna be the
Beneath that
first one to
beautiful
die though?
surface
It ain't gonna be me.
has dreadful, heartbreaking
Oh,
secrets.
it's not gonna be you.
Centuries old and hungry for
It's
vengeance.
definitely gonna be you. One of y'all.
We're looking forward to sharing more details about this.
But that's
very
the
soon,
same thing that
ahead
happened
of
to the girl in the
release
first one. She
2027.
freaking fell in.
Thank you.
Well, both of the girls. Yikes. They got
Now we have
splatted, bro.
one
That's
more
tough.
game to show, and it is something special. This is a brand new title debuting with more than 20 minutes of uninterrupted gameplay.
That was this.
So turn up the volume, sit back, and enjoy.
Is there intergalactic or interstellar, whatever the fuck it's called?
Wait, what they say? It's the last one?
It better be fucking KH or something, bro. Come on, lock in. 20 minutes of gameplay.
It gotta be the big hitter. The biggest one of the day.
GTA? What is it?
Yo, we're in chill.
Oh, my fault, bro. I was downloading.
Oh, I got you when you selling. Oh, never mind.
Shit,
Wait, did I miss everything already?
Oh, GG.
Bro, no.
We're on my last game, bro. Lock in.
This is the last one, bro. Lock.
What is this?
It's about to be Kingdom Hearts.
Ooh, what's
I don't
this?
think it's Kingdom Hearts.
Oh wait, Kingdom
This
Hearts.
music
Oh
sounds
wait.
familiar.
It's about to be Kingdom Hearts, bro.
This
Wait.
music sounds familiar.
God of War.
Wait,
God of
God
War.
of
God of
War.
War.
Oh wait,
God of War.
wait.
This
Oh, wait.
music sounds familiar.
God of War. God of War. God
Wait,
of
it
War.
might be.
God of
Wait,
War.
it might just be. It might just
I'm
be.
wrong.
Hold on. Wait, Santa Monica.
It is God of War. Santa Monica is God of War.
Is it?
Yes.
Say swear.
Be cool.
Wait, don't give me hype. That's oh god, that sounds like some God of War
Bro,
shit.
that
Hold
is
on.
God of War. That's the main female lead.
Yeah.
Find your
Let me
way.
see that white man.
Oh.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
These guys gooning. You hear that?
Huh?
What?
Mm-hmm.
What happened to her?
Boy.
Bro, who is this? Are we getting a
Boy.
Don't tell me getting a remaster of sorts, bro.
I mean, they already announced the remasters, though.
Nah, this I would say this doesn't look like a remaster.
They announced the
Oh,
remasters
shit.
already.
Okay. This is
Unless this is
what
footage
happened
of
in
the
first-
remaster.
Nah.
This is what happened in the first one.
Yeah, this is when they sent off.
Oh.
Don't troll me, bro.
This the 2018 one?
Yeah, this is the 2018 one.
Baby Artrace. Bro, come on, bro. Wait, what if it is a remaster of the old games?
It could, I mean, they already announced these though, so like this wouldn't really be a surprise.
Oh, we're getting a spin-off?
Woo!
Are we getting a Valhalla spin-off?
Oh wait. Oh, that's our song.
We might actually get a Valhalla spin-off. What?
Wait a minute!
So we're going to the faster future. Where we going?
No way.
No, this is
Wait,
Valhalla, bro.
Yo, nah, this is Valhalla. Wait.
That's tough.
Oh yeah,
Ooh.
this is about to be a tough spin-off. Hold on.
Bro, don't make me bust out my jeans, bro. Come on, bro.
What?
What are you?
Yo, what? Get a hold of yourself.
Bro, this shit hype.
Woo! Kratos!
That's right, we played the back.
Let
We
him
played
cook,
in the,
bro. Let him
the
cook,
little
bro.
shit back here.
Hold up. Hey. Headache? Sit down, guy.
This dude. Is that the woman from Daredevil? Bro.
Oh, God,
Bro. It probably is. They probably used their model.
Parent page on my
It is
fucking
her.
screen.
It is her.
Oh.
Fuck is
Parent
that?
page too fun.
She's a giant, right?
Yeah. She's a
What the
giant.
hell is that?
I was gonna say she might be a Valkyrie, but she's a giant.
What the fuck is
Oh my
that?
god, bro. Get this shit off my screen, bro.
You know where I am?
Little ass mutt, bro.
Everybody trying to get a Baby Yoda going, bro. Doesn't work for everybody.
Nah, this could actually be tough.
Wait, so like, does she
I'm
can she cook?
I'm
Wait, so we're gonna-
I'm purchasing this shit.
We're gonna play as her?
I want to see how she
Is she actually box?
She got
She
it.
gets
Starting on
purchased.
path.
Bro, she's a giant, bro. She's throwing.
It's just
throwing hands, bro.
The giant, she don't look giant right now.
Say goodbye.
I really want to see how she fucks.
Hey, bro, it's perspective, bro.
Okay.
Double jump, so y'all. Hey.
You know Loki a giant as well. He's not that big.
Let her cook. Hold on.
He's half giant.
Wait,
buddy.
what did you just say? Bro, this dude low
Bro,
mo.
I didn't say anything crazy. You're about.
No, you
Don't do
did.
it. I didn't say anything crazy. You're making it weird.
Bro, what's that movement back there, bro?
Bro.
Gotta chill.
Huh?
Bro, that is Karen Page. Shit, fake news.
This guy.
You might take that sword. Get you a little weapon.
What's the Demogorgon?
BBL award.
Can't die twice, no?
No.
We get sent to after all.
No, you can't die. You can't die.
Oh shit!
Oh, she's cooking. Hold on.
Parry.
Okay.
She parries with her hand. Damn that kick.
Damn.
The slide.
EMC combat?
Oh wow.
Nah.
Oh, I thought she was gonna stay in the air, bro.
Like that little slide.
Hey.
Oh nah, we got air bombos.
Bro, they got the EMC combat going, bro.
Oh my god!
This is an insta cop.
Air bombos.
Air hocking a cop.
Air bombos.
Juggling his ass.
Oh shit! Ooh shit!
You taking the armor? I'm taking everything.
Finders keepers, bro.
Not facts.
If it works, it works.
Bro, get this little nigga off my screen, bro.
Oh god.
Bro, you know he's the pet for the rest of the game now.
Oh baby ass shit. Fake ass Jeff the
He's like
Land
gonna
Shark.
evolve or something.
I'm getting a mod to get rid of him immediately.
That's ridiculous. Hog Award? Y'all are so goon brained. You guys are so goon brained. It's not even like.
Okay. New fit.
That's looking a fire name though. You can't even lie.
You guys are so goon brained.
Nah, that's too funny.
Yo, what's wrong with her? Is the ground shaking?
She's still like getting her conscience back or something. I don't know.
Ground shit.
Got a headache.
Uber fat ass.
Bro,
I don't think this is Valhalla, bro. I don't even know what this is.
I mean, well, she died, no? Like.
I mean, yeah, but like, there's other dead people here. You can't die in Valhalla, I thought.
That mask.
Maybe she's still getting used to
No,
it.
it can't be. It's not possible.
That's so
Get
aggressive.
the fake talking going.
Yeah, like, you know, I'm not.
But I guess
If
snug
there's
right
another
here.
mask,
I can see it.
Definitely.
the path isn't
There's gonna be
safe.
somebody around the corner.
I have to
Camera
find
too
the
damn
path.
tight.
Where'd the dog go?
Oh, for good, huh?
What is that?
What's it? Can be Boulder.
Yo!
Oh shit.
Oh?
Damn. Oh, that's not good.
Oh,
Oh, she can buy. Oh, damn.
I told you, bro. She
tried,
boxing, bro.
That's gross.
Trying to hit that with a story weekend. Didn't work though.
Wait, this doesn't.
Yo.
Oh wait.
Wait.
I'm saying this doesn't look like the correct mythology. Am I tripping or is this the same mythology?
It's not.
Damn, what is that?
I gotta get a better look at that statue, bro.
Yeah, this does not look like the same mythology. Or am I tripping?
They retcon some shit? What is that?
No, it's like I think it's Indian, bro.
Hey, oh, wait.
Oh wow.
That creature.
What is that? Is that like a seahorse fish thingy?
They threw it. Oh, they killed me. Let's
go. Oh, wait, there's a bunch of them.
No!
They smoked them. Thank God, bro.
Oh,
no, that's crazy.
No way.
Wait. What? What mythology?
No, that's crazy.
They just ass tossing them in there.
Damn.
Crazy. You gotta learn a new attack, girl. Something.
Oh shit.
AOE attack.
What the hell is that?
Shit. What
Bro,
the
what
fuck?
mythology is this, bro?
It looks like. That's weird.
They got on Indian type.
Nah, I'm sorry.
armor,
I was
but
just about to say
what
you're
that
not. You're kind of right with that little Indian shit. Kind of look like it. Oh.
Uh-huh.
Oh yeah, nah, you can definitely, definitely like some Hindu shit.
I'm supposed to know who this is?
It seems Hindu, or it might be Egyptian, low key.
Yeah, no, you're. I was thinking of Kotal Khan the entire time.
Does this guy just sleep with his head burning like this, or like? Do you just
like
sleep with your hair burning? Like, how do you sleep like
Don't
that?
sleep, bro.
Yeah, what's up?
Just turn the flames off.
What is that?
Oh, her mark in her hand.
Ew!
What is that?
Like a tooth?
Another mask.
Oh, y'all know English?
Is this Valhalla? Like, what the fuck?
Nah, she got the Egyptian shit on her belt, bro, and her head.
I wonder, do you think this could set you free?
Damn.
Oh, damn!
Oh my gosh, bro. Nigga didn't waste no time.
And I swear, I will kill you.
Would you like to see how hard it is to die here, Godly?
It's hard to die here, is it?
Oh.
You gotta do something to him.
You can't keep me here.
Oh, it's uncannily Karen Page.
The gateway is closed. There is no escape.
That nigga charging a serious punch.
Oh, wow.
Yo.
Resisting the truth will only make this more painful.
The fuck?
I'm so lost.
Segment.
No.
Oh, it is
Betsy.
Egyptian.
Yeah.
I will handle that problem. You deal with our new
Maybe it's a bunch of them
got
all
dreads.
at once.
That would be really cool, though. If it was like a bunch of mythologies, oh my god, that'd be sick.
Yeah, that would be tough. That's definitely Egyptian.
Oh my god, oh god,
What the
Egyptian.
fuck is that? Big ass panther.
What?
Blindness, buddy.
Stone?
That's tough.
That shit can fly?
That shit fly? Oh,
What?
Like, I guess.
For what? How?
Oh shit, she left. Oh no. Hey, get out of that grab quick!
Oh, damn!
Or they better not end it here, bro.
Bro, you about to get cliffhanger to Doom.
Well,
Like,
I'm saying, like, I'm
about to
too
get cliffhanger
invested,
you of
bro.
Doom to say 2028.
Please, bro.
Wait, we back to gameplay.
Bro.
We're not
Oh
getting
my
this
god.
this year or
think they're
next year.
gone.
It'll say 27 probably.
Be careful.
What the fuck are y'all doing? What is that?
Ooh, what sword that is? That is not jelly cube. What the fuck?
You're
Minecraft slime.
different.
You're a cube. Talking.
I was gonna ask Squad Zero dude. You can find a sheath for his shikai?
Yeah.
Or his sword?
Oh,
For his
yeah,
zanpakuto? So yeah, they see that shit in water.
I'm not the sword. I'm
It was
the
too
rabbit,
sharp.
obviously. And my name is Rue. The cube is Frank.
They got regular names though.
I'm
Throw me
Faye.
off.
There has to be a way out of here.
A way out, but you're not even all here.
Of course I'm not here. I'm dead. You have to be dead to come through the gateway.
It's like you're holding something back.
This isn't working.
Oh, what the hell?
Damn.
What the frick is that?
Something dead.
Where are we anyway?
Afterlife of the gods? I call it the everyone.
Afterlife of the gods.
That's Huey?
Okay, it might actually be every mythology.
What's the plan,
Probably
boss?
tough.
Not your boss, Frank.
It's Huey's voice act? That's hilarious.
That cask. That's why you're trapped.
Yeah. Wait, you made that big explosion happen, right? Could you do that again?
Okay.
My magic.
That's
wrong.
Jack
here.
Wade's voice, I think.
I feel wrong here.
You want out, right?
It is.
I think we all want that.
This thing is in everything now.
We definitely do.
This is
Faye, you need to accept it. All of it. You're dead.
Damn.
How? How do I accept that?
Simple. Focus. You're here. Be here.
But what if I need to be somewhere else?
Then focus on what you do need.
Find your way home.
Oh.
What's that?
Okay.
Oh, her giant form.
What were you
right?
thinking of?
A promise.
Okay, we'll take it. Now let's get out of here.
Okay. Get ready.
Wait, not a good idea. Bad
Wait,
idea.
not here though.
Whoa!
All
right.
Oh,
Okay.
Damn.
what is happening?
Damn, what are in them barrels? Holy
Get
shit.
that dog.
She killed him.
What the fuck are in them barrels? What the hell?
What? Wait, what?
Kratos.
What? Okay,
They
yeah.
trolling, bro. They trolling, bro. Now's not the time.
Bro, don't be edging me, bro. I thought you was gonna actually come
Hey, go
up.
grab the sword, bro.
Imagine a Kratos stand.
That'd be ridiculous.
That would be best.
Niggas out war like
Damn, just like that, bro. Up one barrel.
Oh shit.
You guys, he's depressed, bro. He don't know what to do.
Oh my god.
Oh
Hey.
yeah, nah, the cube tough.
What?
What up?
You should give her the sword.
How do I know I can trust her?
I'll give it back. I promise.
Nick body's in there.
Okay. Take
That
it.
big slime's gonna follow us around, bro.
Surely not.
That shit sharp as hell.
I ain't gonna lie.
Oh.
Damn.
Damn.
Took it so fucking kill your soul out of his body.
Nah, that's OD.
Daniel.
Yeah.
Nah,
This is so
this shit too tough. Yo. Hey. Oh yeah. Oh bro, I need this.
Not until I get you out.
I need this.
Excellent whip attack.
Coming up behind.
Oh shit.
Hey. Now that slime is actually
Cosmic Cube is crazy.
Nah, the cube going dummy in the background. Absorb somebody. Oh my god. Hey.
Yo, Jesus. so nice, bro.
Oh, what? Hey. Oh, bro, no. The combo's gonna be so tough.
Nah, that weave was dirty.
Damn.
Oh, he's about
The knockout.
Got an idea on opening that cage.
Wow.
Hey, kids, get ready!
Come on!
No, I got a promise to keep.
Fine, but lady, that sword, it's more than you think it is.
Oh, we know.
Oh.
That
shit is alive. Oh
my god. Hey, is she in the ground? Yo! Oh.
Already?
Give him the super Broly treatment, bro.
Right?
We get the Western first boss fight? Oh,
Don't make comments that you can't keep, got them.
The fuck? He just summoned a sword out of nowhere.
Yo.
Oh yeah, slime, get it
Look at
out.
him, look here. Hey.
Yo, jump him.
Jiggle on his ass, slime.
Oh, okay.
Damn.
Focus!
That shit's
Win by twin.
okay.
You don't know what
Cosmetic.
What is it?
This is way faster than regular. Oh, she got a face.
Yeah, that shit is so soft.
Oh yeah, that's the weave from earlier.
You got the spot dodges.
You're scared of this
They're
sword.
tough.
Why?
I fear nothing.
She can tether you.
Oh, there were some bosses? It's not.
Weak ass shit out of here.
Good weave!
Kept the dodge, that's cool.
Oh, this is sick.
Bro, we're seeing so much. The game has to
That's
be
what I'm saying. I didn't think we would see this in the
They did say 20 minutes of gameplay.
The game has to be
Oh, did they?
long.
Oh, wow.
Don't give up.
I thought they were gonna show like 5 minutes and say go to YouTube for the rest or something. They showing the whole 20.
Shit.
Yo, you just can't get out of
Oh, bro, the graphics are crazy.
Yeah, bro.
Oh my
The
god.
battle damage, bro.
Yo.
Oh my god!
Oh my god.
He's
Holy
fuck,
shit.
though.
Bro, you're eating that?
Bro, she's hella
Like, I feel like that hurt. Like,
Oh my god,
No.
this guy.
Oh, yo.
nice.
Ooh, clean ass dog.
Nice.
Oh, okay. What is it called?
Luffy?
Love?
Oh, I know exactly what it is. I know exactly what it is.
Okay.
No date. No date. Damn.
Literally none.
No date at all, bro. You're not getting that shit till 2028.
That shit is clean as fuck, bro.
You're not getting that shit
That
till
was a W name drop,
2028.
This was actually a
I gotta
crazy
do my God of War
player.
marathon.
There's only like a couple misses.
I'm not gonna lie, they went.
Nah, this presentation was good.
I'm still thinking about that Until Dawn too, bro. That was
Bro, that shit came out of nowhere.
I was the last name I was
hella
expecting to see.
That shit came out of fucking nowhere, bro.
Wow, bro. Okay.
It's gotta be good too.
3 new God of War games. That's fucking crazy. It's like a new God of War game every year. Remember the last one they shadow dropped?
Wait,
With the one with Kratos and his brother? In development. Yeah, they did. Oh, you didn't see the trailer? Bro, that trailer was crazy.
No, I didn't see anything. I just
Oh,
literally
you
came back.
fucking missed it, bro. That shit was crazy. I put it in chat. That shit was crazy.
Oh, yeah.
That shit was fucking
Wait,
crazy.
what? The Green Goblin?
Yeah, it was fucking Green Goblin, Magneto, and Carnage.
Yeah.
That shit was sick.
Wait,
line.
who's that main villain?
Today.
Oh, that shit's
Doom.
They could.
No, at the top?
lie,
Oh, I
Who's
don't
that guy
know.
at the top?
Oh, we don't know.
Oh, no way, no
Like some
yet?
story shit.
Oh, that shit's crazy.
Damn, that was actually pretty fucking good. I know the Destiny fans are not happy, but that shit was good as fuck.
That was fire, bro.
That was solid. That was fucking good as shit.
I didn't see no
compared to
Xenoverse
other
in
presentations
so
we've seen. That was one of the best ones. Holy shit, that shit was heat. That shit was heat.
Chat, what y'all rating out of 10?
I give that like a 9 out of 10.
8?
If I saw like one more game, probably one more banger, like a 9 or 9 out of 10.
I'm giving it 10. I'm giving it 10 for 10, bro.
That shit
Even
was
the
heat.
mid games was decent.
5 maybe.
That shit was heat.
That was really good.
No farming simulation, no gacha. Oh my god.
Barely. I think it was only like one.
I mean, we're gonna see it at Summer Games Fest probably. Summer Games Fest.
Yeah, that's on the 7th, right?
Nah, Xbox is on the 7th. Summer Games Fest. The schedule for this month, chat, is hold on. Summer Games Fest on the 5th. So this Friday, Xbox Showcase on the 7th. Nintendo did not announce anything yet.
No.
Yeah, Summer Games Fest on the 5th.
Chat, do we got a time for that or what?
Assume it's gonna be 5 p.m. EST. Same time. 5 p.m. EST. Same time.
That one's not too long. Gonna be a little busy.
They got a lot to fucking live up to, bro.
Yeah, I don't know how they're gonna top that, but hey, because that PlayStation Showcase was pretty fucking good.
Reveal I've seen in a while, bro. Easily.
Tomb Raider game was good. Wolverine looked good. Rayman is back. God of War, that shit was good too. Oh my god, the fucking Silent Hill. I mean, was it Silent Hill 2 or whatever the fuck it was? Yeah, the Silent Hill. I don't know what the game was called. The Silent Hill with the black guy. That game looked good too. That ill game looked good. My god. The fucking disgusting.
That ill game looked nasty.
That shit looked crazy. Boy. Yeah, it was nasty. Gosh. That shit looked good.
Yeah, no, I do.
Until Dawn 2. Yeah, that was actually a banger presentation.
Yeah, I seen that one as well before I joined. That shit.
There was hella bangers in that. I don't know how you can hate that. Like, you must only like one type of game if you didn't like that presentation. That shit was pretty good.
Yo, chat.
Did the ball and crowd, bro.
Chat, I'm gonna prepare the list of games for after this. I'm about to put a poll up.
Sushi game.
Oh, that was crazy.
All right, I need to go watch some of these trailers. I'll catch y'all later.
Yeah, I'm gonna catch y'all, boy. Man.
GG's. All right, chat. Let's look at this Tokon trailer again. That shit was fire. That was pretty fucking good, bro. I don't know how you can hate that presentation. That was a banger presentation, in my opinion. That was a banger. King of Gunnar. King of Gunnar is crazy. That Doom team looks sick. Hold on,